we're going to talk about how to get a quick start with SVGs. We'll start by talking about what are SVGs anyway. If you've never heard of them, then that won't mean much to you. What it stands for is Scalable Vector Graphics. So basically, we're talking about a way to put some good looks on your apps and even your Power BI reports. And I'm going to kind of explain what this is in a Christopher Nolan sort of storytelling way. So if you've seen Memento or what's the new one Tenet that he has out, that there's some jumping around. So we're going to do that with this name, but we'll start at the end, we'll go to the beginning, and we'll meet up in the middle here. So graphics, we should all know what graphics are, right? It's just a visual representation of something. It could be an icon, it could be a chart or something like that. So that's the easy part. Scalable, this is one feature of SVGs that is really cool, is that they are nearly infinitely scalable. And I say nearly because I don't think there's a limit on how big you can make them, but there is a limit on how small, and that gets down to pixels, basically. So there is a minimum size that kind of works, but aside from that, you can make them as big as you want without any change to the actual graphic itself. So like a picture or something like that, like a JPEG, if you want a high pixel count, it's going to be a very large file. With these, they're very small. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then Vector, I don't know if any of you recognize this amazing chap right here, but this is Vector he's the villain from Despicable Me. And he had a tagline that's really great. And it's that he's named Vector because he's got, direction and magnitude. And that's essentially what a vector is, right? I don't know if we've all had like vector stuff in math or anything like that. But this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what SVGs are and how they work. It's that they work using vectors. And so basically you've got a 2D plane and you are basically giving instructions for how to draw a path within that plane. And that's pretty much it. And we'll look into that and see on the code level kind of what that means, and hopefully I can communicate how great that is and how awesome it is. But that's the name. And so another important factor is that they're essentially text files. So it's essentially instructions for how to build a graphic. And that's super awesome. And again, I'm gonna try to show you why. But one reason why that's awesome is that you can do string operations on them, and it's a really good thing. So if you're talking about like something like substituting text, if you're talking about like injecting text or something like that, you can do that with these. And that means that you've got a graphic that is no longer just a static image, but it can be very dynamic. And so I'm actually kind of getting ahead of myself here with some of my points, but here's the why should I care thing, and hopefully I can sell this well. But thinking mainly about Power Apps, there's a very limited icon set. So there's not too much that you can do natively in a graphical sense. So this is an easy tool to expand that dramatically in a pretty easy way. Next, again, I kind of touched on this, but you can create dynamic icons and graphics fairly easily. And let me just stop myself too. If there are any questions or anything like that, I don't have the chat up on my screen. So feel free to speak up and interrupt if you'd like or anything like that. But yeah, just as we go along, feel free to cut in if you've got a question or comment or anything.
I will monitor the chat also. So
awesome.
Find a good spot to ask you questions for that as well. So either in the chat or come off mute. We're casual here.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so another thing I kind of touched on again is small file sizes. You can basically have a really like what is essentially a paragraph of text that creates an image for you. So it's really easy to store, and from an app perspective, that means that you can have a pretty rich visual experience without having a super heavy app that takes a long time to load, that just has a whole bunch of stuff in there. It's not very heavy, pretty lightweight. And last is just having a more visually appealing app, which also makes it a more accessible app. I've been really thinking a lot about this because we kind of had a situation that I was made aware of at work. I work for an oil service company that basically services oil and gas wells. And so a lot of our employees, it's a labor type job, a lot of blue collar workers. And we actually happen to have 2 employees right now who actually don't have the ability to read. And from the work perspective that they do, that's actually fine. And that's, there's maybe some stigma around that, and I just want to maybe say that they're both super intelligent guys. They're great workers. It's just that this is a skill that they did not develop for whatever reason, be it schooling or whatnot. So having something that's visually accessible to them basically gives them the ability to just do the same things with all the apps that their company has, and to not really miss a beat in that experience. So it's a really powerful thing, and there's other examples too. That, I mean, if you've got like maybe people who have English as a second language, or maybe something like dyslexia, this could make a big difference for them. So it's a pretty important thing, and worth learning, and worth the effort that it takes, in my mind. So, all right, we're gonna have basically 3 quick start methods that we'll go over. There's the beg, borrow, but don't steal method. I was trying to come up with a cheeky name, but theft is a real thing, so there's no need to steal. We can find good things, and I will be showing you 2 resources that are really awesome for some great SVGs that are free and legal. So next is the DIY, which stands for do it yourself. And I'll basically show you a really quick, easy way to make an SVG that does not require learning any software that you probably don't already know or have. And then the last method is the hacker method. And with that one, we're going to basically be hacking SVGs to do some dynamic things that we want to do. So we'll get started in the first method here. So with this method, basically there's 3 steps. We're going to find an SVG that we like, ethically sourced, of course. And then using Notepad, we're going to get that code. And then we're basically going to stick it in our app after that. We're going to just do one little change with Notepad. And from there on out, it's going to be in our app. So I'm going to tab out here and get to my web browser, if I could find it with all these windows I've got. There we are. Oh, and that's jumping ahead right there. So is that. Oh, man. I'm not doing so great here. I'm showing off my stuff here. So I've got a little basic app that we're going to use to show this stuff off, one step at a time. And so the site that I want to show you first is the site called loading.io. And what I've used this for is for these very awesome little loading spinners. And they have a bunch that are free, which is awesome. So there's quite a few different styles. So you probably find something that you like. They do have some for sale as well, which I'm not here to push a product for them, but their free things are really cool. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take one of these, and there's this little download button here. And again, this is download with a free license. One thing is you do have to set up an account with this website. But after that, it's all good. So you can choose from static or animated. We are going to choose the animated version because we want that nice spinning effect. And then here it gives us a download screen. Most of these, there's no need for attribution, but some of them you do have to keep just their little attribution in the code. And that's the only condition for having them. But we'll download this. And I'm going to open this and show you something that's a thing to watch out for real quick. Just to have this in your mind. But, oh, of course, it opened it in the same browser. I want to open it in, let me actually skip out of here. I want to open it in Internet Explorer, because you'll notice that there's no spinning, that there's no changing of colors or anything like that. Something to be aware of is that not every browser is perfectly compatible with every aspect of an SVG. It can display the graphic, but things like animation and even some weird things like color opacity aren't fully compatible. The one that's the most incompatible that I've found is Internet Explorer, which hopefully will make that kind of a non-issue as that goes away. But just something to be aware of. And this does come up if you have users that use the Windows 10 version of Power Apps, just so you know. So just that little pitfall out of the way.
Have you found that like modern, maybe Chrome, Firefox, Edge, I might be missing some, are those working pretty well?
Yes, yeah, they are. They all seem to work great. I've not tried Firefox, but I'm pretty sure that it is fully compatible. But
Okay.
yeah, quick. Looking at step 2 here, we're going to get to the code of this. And again, I show that if we double click on that, it will simply open it. But we're going to do a little trick here. If we right click and say open with, and we're going to choose Notepad, but the first time you do this, I'm sure that Notepad will not be listed. So I'm going to show you how to get there. We're going to select choose another app, and it brings up this list, and it probably will not have Notepad here either. So you'll probably have to say more apps, and it gives you a list, and you simply just choose Notepad. Once you do this the first time, it should show up as an option after that, which is kind of nice. So, and also we don't want to check this because every time you try to look at an SVG that you have, it will just open up the code in Notepad, and that's no fun. So we'll leave that unchecked. And this is the beast here. So it looks like a lot, and it kind of is, but we're going to break this down really quick. And I'm going to put some space here just to help, and I'm going to put some space here as well. So if you've used HTML, this might look kind of similar, especially with these angled brackets and whatnot. So it does have a similar convention to that, where there's like open tags and closing tags and things like that, if that helps. This first little chunk here is kind of a header, and it not only tells that, hey, this is an SVG and some other stuff like that, but the one really important thing, and you'll see this width and this height, is that it sets the size of the space that we're going to work in. So that's that 2D space that we are going to be basically drawing vectors in. And the other thing is that there's this view box, and this is kind of an odd concept, but it's kind of like being able to zoom in or zoom out on that canvas that we've created. So say if you wanted to look at the top left quarter of this view box, you could set it up to do that. We're not going to jump really into too much of this. This is hopefully kind of as deep as we go with some of the things here, because this isn't about learning to code it, but just so you kind of get an awareness of these things. That's kind of all we're trying to do, is the high level view. So these next chunks, this is actually where the shapes are made. And a couple things to point out. This G, it stands for group, and it's kind of how you would unite multiple objects and be able to kind of assign properties to them as a group, if that makes sense. In this case, though, there's actually only one object per group. And the reason for that is this little guy here, they're basically using it to rotate. And we'll see how this works at a real level, but we're just going to look at this code for one more second here. Next thing is this is actually making a rectangle. And not only can you draw vectors themselves, but they do have some primitive shapes in there. So like rectangles, circles, and ovals, things like that. So those do exist. And this is basically just the stuff for that. They're basically just attributes that you fill in if you're going to do this by hand or whatnot. And then the last thing we'll kind of look at is this animate attribute. And this is what gives it the spinning effect. It's basically just telling it to change the opacity every second, basically. And the way that it achieves the effect of motion that you're seeing is the timing of when the animation effect starts. So what kind of looks like spinning is really just that particular object fading in and out and starting at a different time. And so what that thing has done is basically just put all these times in. And if you look at all these other chunks, it's actually all the exact same thing except for two attributes. There's this rotate and when it begins. And we'll kind of see how that affects things. So with that out of the way, that's hopefully the deepest dive into the code chunky stuff that we get for right now. What we're going to do is we're going to make this thing able to be put into a Power App. And the way we're going to do that is simply by going to replace, and we're going to replace all the double quotes with single quotes. And we're going to do that. And the reason that we're doing that is because the way that Power Apps denotes text is by using double quotes. So if we have a bunch of double quotes in there, it's basically going to be stopping and starting the text, and that'll just mess things up. So we've copied our code, and we are going to go close that guy out. I'm going to go into here, and I've set this up a little differently than you would, just to kind of prove a point here. But we'll unite on this image object. But I'm going to put it in this text box for now. And I've got a little snippet of code commented out here. We're going to simply paste what we've got in there. And I'm going to remove these comments. And we're going to comment out this sample image. And lo and behold, we have our little spinner there. So the way that this works, and the reason that I had this text box here is so that you can kind of visually see what Power Apps needs to see to make this happen. It can't take just the raw code for that. It needs it in a URL format. And it also needs this little chunk to say, hey, this thing is an SVG, and here's the URL code for it. So this is kind of the magic that makes it happen right here. It's simple little line of code there. And the other reason I wanted to do this is to also just kind of reinforce the fact that this is just a text file. So we're taking the text from this text box and sticking it in the image control, and it gives us a graphic. It's really cool. I don't know. I nerd out about this, but I think it's a really crucial part of this that it makes it easier to use and really simple to store on the data side. So that's really cool.
We had a little question. Could you zoom in on the little magic? I imagine it's that little piece you put before that encode URL.
Oh, yeah,
I think that's what he meant. Fernando, if I got it wrong, please correct me.
Yes, and let me do this because I don't have a zoom thing. So let me insert a label, and we'll put this, and we'll make this all text here. Well, actually,
for everyone watching, if you click on the shared screen control mouse wheel, you can zoom in yourself on specific areas of Timothy's screen.
Oh yeah. Okay, make this much bigger here. Oh man, so let's go 35 maybe. Is that pretty big?
So that looks good.
What's missing in between here is simply that ampersand, and then the quotes around the data and up to the comma. And I will actually be showing you, like, I'll be giving you a resource that kind of has this built in. And frankly, I don't remember this. I always take it from this other thing that I'm going to show you because I don't know. I just don't remember. It's a small chunk of thing, but it's something I just don't stick in my brain. And with that, that's a good actually place. Let me get back in here. And we're going to jump to the part B of this, which is you could do that and track down these SVGs and do this work to put them in, or you can use this app that I'm about to show you that is awesome. And not only does that little chunk of code before, but has a ton of icons that fit perfectly with the icons that are already built in to Power Apps. And so we're going to go back here. I'm going to show you this. We're going to go to the Microsoft Power Apps community, and we're going to scroll down here to the Canvas Apps component samples. And there's no surprise, but it's the first featured one here. And this is made by a user called Redcap. His real name is Emmanuel Gallus, and he is a French Power Platform guy who made this amazing tool. It's great. So I'm going to click over into this app that I have. So here's kind of what it is. It's basically all the icons from the Office UI Fabric icon set. And I'll click on that to show what this is. This is basically a resource for app makers and more traditional app makers to get official Office icons in their apps. And he basically made a Power App component that you can get that from. And so I'm going to just click on, let's say, this no webcam guy here. Here's what's really cool that he did. It's got all the SVG code right here, along with that little snippet at the front. So as long as you just pick a color for the icon that you want, you can then copy and paste this code straight into an image control. Go back to this guy. And there it is, right there. Just super simple, easy peasy. So I mean, you could almost leave the doc after this because this app is so good, and there are so many icons that you can probably find what you're looking for. But please stay because it doesn't cover everything, and we've got a couple more things to go. But this is awesome, and I cannot recommend it enough. I use this thing all the time. It's super cool. So go download it and also maybe give him a follow on Twitter as well. He's totally awesome. So go check him out. So let's go to back here. Let's go to the next step, which is the DIY section. So this is going to be for the cases where, okay, we've looked around and there's nothing in that Office UI set. There's nothing online, and I need an icon or an image for something. What am I going to do? Well, it's PowerPoint to the rescue here. And I geek out about this way more than I should, but it's super easy to create your own graphics of any kind. And I'm going to show a really quick and easy way to get started with this. So we're just going to open up a blank PowerPoint presentation here. And I'm going to clear some stuff out. We're going to delete these guys and just give ourselves a blank canvas. Now, usually icons are probably a square. It depends on what you're doing, but we're going to make this thing a square. There's these easy guys here, but you can also do a custom size. And you can do it in any size that you want, almost up to 56 inches, which is pretty huge. With SVGs, again, it doesn't really matter because they are scalable. So we're just going to make it an even square. This part does not matter unless you have things that are inside of here. So we're just going to say ensure fit, but we don't have anything to fit. So we've got a little canvas. And the next thing that I'm going to do is show you right here in this format background. We can set the transparency of the background. So if you want an image that is fully transparent, you want to crank this up to 100%. If you want an icon that has a solid background or something like that, you can leave that here, and we can change the color and all that. But we're going to go for a fully transparent one. Now, something that PowerPoint has that's really cool is its own icon set. And some of these icons range from things that are on the goofy side to something that actually is pretty cool that you might use. So it's a pretty easy way if you need kind of a one-off icon or something that you just can't find anywhere. You might check here and you might find it. So yeah, I mean, if you've got a nursery at your business and you need an icon for something like that, there's baguettes, shuttlecocks. It's awesome. There's tons of stuff. So we'll just pick something here. Let's do this meeting guy. And we'll insert that. So if you have found the object that you want and say this is what we want for the icon, all we is this. So I'm going to make inches. And PowerPoint has some cool stuff where it has those snaps, so you can align it really easily. So once we center that, this looks fine. The reason that I do 7 inches and have a 7.5-inch canvas there is that it's nice to have a bit of a safe zone with your graphics. So that's basically just the way that I kind of plan those in. But we could scale this up and still be within that, but we'll just leave it like this for now to kind of make it simple. And then the thing that we will do after we've kind of created this, and again, we could insert more icons if we want, or they also have shapes, lots of different things we could use. Once we've made that the way that we want it, all we do is go File, and there's 2 ways to do this, but I'll show you the most direct way. And we click Save As, and then on a place to save it, and I'm just going to go to the desktop here. And instead of saving it as a PowerPoint presentation, which you would want to do actually anyway, but there is an option to save it as a scalable vector graphic format. And I did show this the last time I was here, but it's super cool. I really hope that someone will try this out and just see what you can create. So I'm gonna cancel this. Well, no, actually, I'll save this just to show this. You can also save just the one item, like that one that we made, or if you save all slides, it basically makes a folder for each to hold all the different slides that are in there. So you can use this as kind of like a workbook to just create all your icons in, and then easily export them all to SVG just with one click of the button here. I'm going to say just the one on this, and we will go. Actually, oh, what am I doing here? That's what I need. No, that's not what I need. That's what. So it's named Presentation 2, and if we open this up, there's our graphic. It's all well and good. And if we open this with Notepad, you're going to enjoy what you see, but these things make pretty messy code.
Yeah, I was going to have that question if it's like standard SVG code or if PowerPoint spits out some PowerPoint code.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
It's definitely PowerPoint code.
Yeah.
And the good news is, though, it works as is. So if it's fine and we don't need to do anything with it, then this is good. It's a bit chunkier, but not too bad. And I won't cover how to clip this down, but it's actually pretty straightforward to do it. It does require just a tiny bit of knowledge about some of these things, but the real meat and potatoes of it is all in here. It's these paths, and this actually is a good showcase of that vector thing. So these are the instructions to build the vectors that make up that graphic. And the language of it is not too important, but I will share one thing really quick. That if you are interested in learning more about that and getting into that, this is the site you want to go to. And the way you can find it pretty easily, and I'll just show this, is MDN, which is the Mozilla Developer Network, and then SVG, which came up because I've done this a bit. But it should be the first thing right there. And this has all the documentation you could ever want to learn about anything SVG. And you know, it's a bit to learn and jump into, but if you get the bug, this is the place to find it. Otherwise,
I've seen W3 has a lot of stuff also. Would you recommend that?
Yeah, they're okay too. They're actually all right. I like, personally, I like the way that the Mozilla site has things structured. It's a lot easier for me to find like references to things there. But yeah, so that W3, and that should just be like W3 SVG.
Yeah. I've noticed it's like at the beginning of every SVG, it's like w3.org. So are they the creators of SVG? Like, I don't know. Seems like that's where it's all gets stored. I don't know what the link was with that.
Yeah, I actually don't know what that is either, but that is like in all of them.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah, this is also good. And they do have some kind of cool examples. But for me, like if you want to find a particular attribute or something, it's a little harder to find in my experience on this site. But this is a great one as well. So again, yeah, check it out. They all have really good examples that you can just drag and drop into an app using this little chunk of code here, and making sure that you've got single quotes instead of double quotes, so you can get that going right away. I'm going to step over here really quick, and again, we've got this nasty bit of code. We're going to just do our little replace all, and this is essentially ready. Aside from needing that little chunk of code, which I put in here for the demo just to have that. And this will be an unsurprising result that this will just give us exactly what it should. And we've got an icon right there. Now, once you have this, you probably would want to store it somewhere, depending on what you're using. And the nice thing about it being text is that you can store it virtually anywhere. If you want to have a SharePoint list of these, you could do that. I myself, I store them in SQL. That's what we use. And so like on, a reference table, it's a list of different things, and I need an icon for those things. I just have a text field that I can drop these into. And you would want to do just the SVG code that you paste in here. You probably wouldn't want to do the whole bit. And the reason for that is basically usability. You can always put this little chunk of code right here and then just reference this item or whatever. But if you want to use it for something else and get to that graphic, you're going to have to get rid of this code because that's not going to work universally. Whereas if you just store the SVG graphic itself, it's more usable that way. I haven't actually used it for anything but Power Apps, but because that's what we do. But yeah, and another cool thing too, this I think is really an awesome idea, is that you could make an Excel table of all the icons that you want, and then import that into your app. And you could actually make one that you could import into any app if you want to basically build an icon set into Power Apps. That'd be a great way to do it. So just have an Excel file, put these all in a table. You could have a column for names, even, if you want an ID number with them or something like that, knock yourself out. But then you just basically add that to your Power App, and you've got an easy to reference graphic set. So that's, I don't know, that's pretty cool. You guys doing all right? Am I flying too fast? Are we covering too much ground?
We are good. I love learning about SVG.
Okay.
Jake shared some really cool with us that you could format SVG with Visual Studio Code. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it makes it really easier to read. Looks like that's about, some of my first exposure to SVG, but instead of a bunch of numbers, able to see the colors, I could decipher a little bit more happening there.
Yes, that's totally a great comment. And actually, I do that occasionally myself. With this one, my objective was just to give like the easiest, and because not everybody's so stoked to get into code, it might be a little intimidating, but that's an awesome suggestion, and it's not that intimidating once you do it. So go download that and try it out. Great tip.
We do have a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between using this method rather than uploading the image into the media folder?
That is a great question. So there's, well, I've not tried to upload media. I've done that for static things like GIFs and PNGs. What my thought is, though, is that you might not have as much access to the raw code. I'm not sure how that would work, and that's going to touch on the third step. But we could actually try that and see what happens. So I want my media, and let's upload. Let's try this out. Okay. One thing that it would kind of touch on, maybe, I don't know, just thinking about it, that's going to hit up on your, like, the size of your app to some degree, because that's basically going to be right there tied into the initial download of the app. Whereas, like, if you have it from a code source, like the Excel method I talked about is going to do the same thing, because that's going to be built in. But pulling it in from a data source, I think that won't make the app size as big, but these are really small, so that may not matter. But I'm going to try one thing here, and let's see if we can get to the text part of it. So it's image 8. This there. Yeah, okay. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Rookie mistake here, guys. Okay, yeah, all right. So this is kind of what I thought. So the way that Power Apps handles images that are in there is that it basically has a location for them. So you see this app res and then resources / presentation 2. So this would be maybe not a deal breaker, depending on your scenario, but basically you can't do anything dynamically with this image now, because this is all that you can get to is its address with Power Apps, as opposed to getting access to the text that's the code. So that was a great question. That's something I've not really considered. So thank you very much for that. And does that answer that adequately?
I think it's good. I'll let you know if I follow up. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and we're really going to get into the difference here on this next thing. So we'll just progress our slideshow. And then the last one that we're going to dive into, I called the hacker method. And it's basically where we're going to take something and we're just going to mess with it and change it into something else. And the options for this are just nearly unlimited. There's so much that you can do, and I've not touched the surface, I feel like, as far as what can be done. So I'm going to just show you what simple things I've kind of gotten into, and you know, hopefully you guys can take that and run with it and see what you get. But let's dive back into our little app here. I had a little scenario that I thought was great to illustrate this, where before I even knew what SVGs were, I was building the first Power App for the company I work for, and it was a maintenance tracking app. And this app needed to be fully offline because because basically our guys work out in the middle of nowhere, and they don't always have a good connection. So what I thought was a good idea was to have a thing that alerted them to whether there was new data to download or not, and doing that without just fully pulling in all the data. So I created a way to do that, but then I needed a way to alert them. And I came up with a similar method to this, but it was not nearly as good. I had to basically superimpose icons on each other and create these rules to do that. But if I'd had this would be a great thing. So what if we could simply have one graphic that we could put a little thing in to alert them that there was more data, and make it dynamic so that when there was new data, that thing showed up, and when there was not any data, then it would just look normal. So here's what we're going to build, and we're going to do that. They're using icon this set, and there is a is it refresh, I think. Oops. Yeah, the refresh icon. So we have that, but what we need is this little data barrel thing here. And on this first page, there just so happens to be this guy right here that has that little data barrel. So how could we take this and put it in? Well, let's find out. So essentially what we need to do, just using like a visual math thing, is we want to take this and we want to subtract that. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to put an image in here, media. And this is going back to the fact that these are text files. So this is the data for that icon. We're going to put it in here. And each of these is a vector. It's a shape. So what if we simply just remove one of these and see what we have? So we're going to delete this. Oh, maybe did I hit delete? I'll get it together here. And let's see what we're left with here. So what that did was that removed this corner section here. So that's good. We're cutting things out. Let's take it a little bit further. And this one's pretty easy example, but this is something that you could do with any of these, that if you want to see what's going on, just kind of use a process of elimination. And with that, let me move this out of the way of that parenthesis. We've actually got our shape. So the definition for that shape is just this chunk right here. So what we can do then is we can take this and we can put it into this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this guy and put it back in our shape. And let me say this first, though, actually, the reason that we can do this is because of a very special condition, and that is that all of these have the same size. The canvas that we're working in is the same for all of them, and that's because they were all from this source. If you try to do this with things that are kind of hodgepodged, you might find that you get a very different result, that maybe the image you put in will not line up the way that you want it to. So just to put that out there, this is kind of a special case with this. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this guy, and and that was just the path itself. So I'll show you what I'm cutting. So basically everything that's from this path And that's with inside this group thing. We just want the path part. So we put that in, and let's see what we get. So we've got it in there, but we don't want that. We don't want it to be see-through. So we need to figure out a way to kind of put a background on there, and it'd probably be nice if we could get a margin on there. So I'm going to show you a couple quick little things. And are we doing okay on time here, guys? Is this?
Yeah, take your time.
The 1 hour?
Take your time.
Okay. So with that process of elimination, we can actually find like what defines this whole outer shape, because some of those other paths are actually removing sections in here. And so we're just going to kind of do that again, and just to kind of maybe belabor this point, but we'll take this out and we'll take a look. And so that was basically defining that top part. And we're going to take out this next part. And what we should be left with is just that barrel. So what we could do with this then is we've got a shape that could make up a background that we can color the way that we want to, because it's got the color right here. So we've got a white background. Let's just change this to white, and this is just the hex code for white. And now we'll see that we basically got a hole there. So why don't we just take another one of these and drop that over the top here. See what that gets us. And I should note as well that it draws these in the order that they appear. So this path is drawn first, and that is that refresh shape. This path is second, which is that kind of white background. And so this one will be third, and it will be the most on top. So what we get now is pretty close. We've got that shape. We've got a background here. Well, it'd be nice, again, to have a little separation. So I'm going to just put in a little thing that, again, you might just have to know. This would come through either that MDN site or the SVG tutorial. There is an attribute called stroke, which defines a color for a border. And we're going to make that white as well. Oops. And we'll take a look at this and see what happens here. So it's very subtle, and let me kind of zoom in on this. But you could probably barely just see that there is some separation there, right? It's very, very subtle, but it exists, right? Yeah, yeah. So what we want to do is expand that a bit. And thankfully, there is something called stroke width, stroke hyphen width, that defines how wide that stroke is. So I'm just going to put an arbitrary number in there. We're just going to go with 50 and see what that does. And there's kind of a point to be made here. You can see that it's very subtle again. It's not very big. Well, our canvas size matters when we're choosing the width of things, because it's basically 50 pixels within a canvas that's 2048 by 2048. So if we want something more bold, we kind of have to think about those ratios a bit. So let's maybe just try with like a 10%. And since we're at like 2048, let's say 205. And this is something that could be, messed with if you're trying this on your own or something. But again, this is arbitrary to the canvas size. And so that's looking all right, I think. So we've got two images put on one another, but how do we then make it dynamic? Well, this is just a text object. And so I'm gonna cheat a bit, and I'm just gonna go into here and show this so I don't have to just do all the code. But all I've basically done is, so we ended this text item here, and we've put an and to kind of concatenate these things together like we would another string. And we put an if statement here that says if checkbox.value, which is basically shorthand for equals true, So we'll just line that out just to make that more apparent. But if that checkbox is true, then put this text in there, which is the background and that shape. And then we end that if statement. We put another ampersand to concatenate this text, and then we have to make sure that all of our text is wrapped in double quotes. And that is all it takes to basically make this dynamic. Now, this is a checkbox, but you could put any type of condition in here. And in fact, you could have multiple conditions. You could have multiple shapes that show up, because you could maybe put a switch in here and check for multiple conditions and have multiple different shapes. But for this, we basically just have this Boolean statement that says, well, if this thing's true, then show that. And if not, then don't. So again, this is a bit of the power of those. And I'll show one other thing that's great on the customization side. So notice that all these colors are distinctly defined. Like we've put a whole thing in there. Well, something we could do is we could either leave those the way they are, put something else in, or we could substitute text and make it a dynamic color scheme. So let me show what I'm talking about here. Oops. Substitute. And I like to tab these over a bit to keep that in there. So the color that we want to change, let's say that we want to change the black, which is this. And we want to make that something else. Well, over here, I've got this little button. And when I push this button, all it does is defines some colors. And there's this icon color and a background color. So what we want to do is we want to take this and we want to substitute. And actually, I'm going to need to say first here, because this is a collection. Just to make this thing. And then we need to close off our substitute bracket. So essentially what we've just told it to do is to look at all this text right here, and wherever you find this string, put whatever is here there. And if we click on this, an internal error, well, let's see what works. So what I'll do is, because there's nothing in that, it's an empty collection right now. So that's why there's an error. And also to note, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but SVGs default to black if the color is undefined or if there's an error with that color. Just so you know. So we can have an error in here and this will still show up black. But if we click this button, we then turn this thing to green, because again, it's just text and all it's doing is substituting our other color code for this black. So with this, you could again make conditions to change colors, to basically do a lot of stuff like that. Or if you have a color palette that is changeable, like if there's a customizable color palette in your app, you can actually set it up so that the icons can change color with that palette and still look great and fit. So that's a good thing. That's something you really can't do any other way. So, oh no, getting ahead.
We got a little question for you.
Yeah.
Do SVGs use a lot of space? And space, maybe memory size, Fernando? I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, they don't really. Again, because it's text. If you think about what it takes to store a string of text, that's one of the smaller things you can store, as opposed to an actual image. That is basically you're looking at a small paragraph, because this is all the code right there.
Yeah.
So it's really not much space. If you had an image, and if we put that into a thing where we were seeing like all the symbols that it has in that image, like a base 64 thing or something, it's going to be pages of information. So they're very lightweight, very low storage. So that's a great question.
Related to the performance of the app, you ever seen it slow in rendering the image, or trying to think performance wise, do you see any?
No, not really. Not that I can think of. Yeah, I mean it's near instant. I'm pretty sure. And I will the next thing I'm going to be doing is showing like example apps, and these are actually full production apps. So these are, yeah, they're getting used, and kind of showcase, and they get fairly graphic heavy, and that the SVGs are never the issue.
Right. Cool.
So
good to know that.
Yeah. So we'll jump into this.
Unlike my DAX, that takes a while to render. Also, Power BI sometimes.
Yeah, and that's I don't know too much of the use in Power BI as far as like straight up SVG code. I'm gonna cover one thing that's a pretty cool tool, but it's not a direct. I'm putting it in, but yeah. So I don't know too much about that.
Spark lines inside like a matrix. I've seen that used. Or like, you have a table and you want to show a spark line inside that, or a bullet chart.
Yeah.
Instead of making its own visual, right in line next to columns of data. I've done that once. Really fun in learning it. So I think that's one of the most popular use cases I could think of. Small multiples, things like that.
Yeah, that's a great use case. That's good. That's good. Yeah. So this it's the same app that I showed last time. Again, we're recycling, but I wanted to showcase there are graphics kind of all over. There's not so much on this one. I'm not going to scroll down any more than this on this page, just because we've got some employee names down there that I'd like to not dox them. But like, yeah, these little guys that keep popping up here. This is basically an activity feed that just shows the past, I don't know, I think it's like 8 weeks of activity. And in the proper app that doesn't kind of have this data masking that I kind of made up, it have their picture and their first name here. And these are clickable links. You can go there, but it just kind of shows the activity. One kind of fun thing that I just kind of implemented was this guy here. And we've got, basically in SQL, we've got a table that has all the different types of scheduled time, and they all have a graphic with them. So doing something like this is as easy as kind of making like a gallery, and then you reference that line of data, but then you just reference the icon in the SVG format that we showed with that little stuff, and you've got a thing that's just a nice little graphical representation. Vacation, we got a little palm tree here. Just adds a nice little touch that text doesn't, and makes it easy to scan. Kind of reduces that cognitive work that you have to do, because rather than processing the words, you can say, okay, well, home in a briefcase. Tim's working from home. So some other areas here. Okay, this one's kind of fun. So we've got this task routine here where employees can be assigned tasks, and it might be something like you need to do this paperwork, or you need to like do this training by such and such date. And I've made a little blinker here. This is an SVG that basically just uses that animate, very similar to that loading.io example. Basically just had a thing that animates the opacity and just sits here and blinks. And because this thing right here is a component, that thing shows up everywhere. So you got just a nice little reminder that there's a new task right there. And what doesn't happen with this example one is that when you go to the tasks, there's a condition there that just checks the date time that it is right now versus the date time of the newest task. And if the date time that you checked it is later than when that task was created, then it basically says, okay, don't blink that anymore. So that's kind of a fun way to incorporate that. It's kind of a compliance by annoyance thing, maybe, because it just blinks and blinks and blinks until you get it. But that's kind of a fun one there. And again, it's animating things. If we go back to, let's see, I think I have that still up right here. It really is as simple as basically saying, like, I want to animate the opacity of this thing, and then you just basically set a time for it. And I don't have this begin stuff. I don't have the key times either. But you can just set the value and the duration and the repeat count, and you've got something that's animated right away. And you can do that with nearly any attribute, which is the fun thing, and stuff that I haven't really explored that lends to some really cool things, because you could have something shooting across this, or like bubbling up and hanging out there, or something like that. There's all sorts of things that if you've got the creativity and you just put a little bit into it, you could probably figure out a way to make any kind of icon that you want there. So that's kind of fun. I also have one that is for this is my overdue task one, which is that basically just looks for overdue tasks, and if there's one, it just blinks until they complete that task. And I'm sure they love that one. But some other examples. We've got a SharePoint document library here that's plugged in this app, and we're going to look at this SDS documents. That stands for Safety Data Sheets. And basically what those are just like the chemical makeup of all the different things that are used, because if there's a spill or if someone gets it on them, we need to have a resource to know what it is. And basically just have a thing that looks at the file type and then uses the appropriate icon. And all these are just SVG icons. And I'll have another thing to show that's a bit better probably to display it. But then those icons line up with this mobile app download section of this app. So if there's a file that's Adobe Acrobat, a PDF document, they can line up that icon with this icon and then choose their operating system and know which app they need to download to get that file if they don't have it on their phone. So just, kind of a simple way to use those visuals and tie them together to help communicate something a little easier. So any questions, comments, anything else coming up?
I love that. It looks like you'd get that app out of iOS, right? From like Apple Store, Android Store. This isn't like, for a small company in Wyoming, I would never expect like this is the tool we get to use. So I hope they recognize that in your company, because I just absolutely love that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to show just one more thing that ties into Power BI. But there's this app right here that is our employee management app, and this thing is more software than an app. This is basically where like all of our employee information goes through. We handle like our benefits, just everything through this thing. And I want to show, well, okay, so since this is up, this is what it looks like when you break your collarbone playing tag at a wedding. So that's that thing. But I'm going to go over here to our safety incidents section. And I've pre-filtered this just so we're kind of showing stuff that doesn't actually have that much information with purpose, because again, we're not going to dox anything here, but we've got this little graphic that can show where injuries have occurred on this body. And this thing is really fun to me because it's pretty crazy. This is actually a Power BI graphic, but it's not from Power BI, if that makes sense. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. So this is a heavily redacted report that we have. And this is actually on display in our office usually, but because it's being recorded and everything, I just found it fitting to kind of redact stuff. But if you come into our office, we've got a hub 2 on the wall that you can basically see this and interact with it. But this is where that graphic came from. And these are some SVGs that I actually made in PowerPoint with the purpose of this report being our incident information report. So any time that someone gets hurt, anytime there is like a stop work situation where they caught something and they stop work, and we report all these things, and this allows us to visualize where on the equipment they're happening, if there was an injury, which these ones, this is filtered down by first aid events that have happened within a range of time. But this shows where on their body, and then we can filter this. So say, where are these shoulder injuries happening? Well, they're happening in the tubing board and on the floor of the rig. And with that information, we can then adjust our training and whatnot, because the fact of the matter is, and this kind of shows this because we track this, but historically, a lot of injuries happen with people who are really new on the job, and that's just something that shouldn't be. That's something we don't want. So this is something we've really targeted. Well, to get that graphic into Power BI, I'm going to show you one other thing, and this will be the last kind of commercial for somebody else's thing, but OKViz makes these visuals, and this one in particular is called Synoptic Panel, and it has a designer aspect to it. The panel is the thing that actually you put into Power BI and shows the graphic that you want, but the Synoptic Designer is the thing where you can actually make a graphic that ties into your data. So this one is this human body one. And essentially what's happened here is, and what you do with this tool, is you start with an image and then you basically just draw in these sections and you label them to tie them into your data. So what's really cool about that then is that we've basically got a table that we track these things in, and we can visualize that right away. Well, I thought, man, that'd be a pretty cool visual to have. So I took the visual that that came from there and just kind of plopped it into Power Apps, and I discovered something that's pretty crazy about SVGs that I did not know. What this is a PNG image that is embedded into an SVG, and then each of these sections is an SVG object that is basically responding to the data or to the conditions, and that's all that is. So essentially with SVGs, you can actually embed other graphics into them, which is wild. And I took this code. Oh, no, I didn't. That's on my desktop. Let me grab that real quick just to show this thing. Right here it is. Now, this is ugly. It's terrible. Don't worry about it, though, because we're not making anything like this. But and this actually does showcase how graphics are much heavier than the SVGs, because all this right here is that PNG.
Ugly, ugly, ugly.
All that. Just, yeah, ugly, terrible. We don't want anything to do with that, right? But once we get down here, and you can see the scroll bar that's just moving and moving, moving, we'll get down to the SVG side, which is super tiny. It's a fraction of that code. And here's all this is basically, it's in a gallery that's got data, and so it's just saying, hey, if that has this body location, then we're going to put this chunk of text in, which happens to be the head. And so what it's doing here, which I think is just pretty awesome, is, again, we've embedded a graphic within a graphic, and then we are using data to surface other parts of that image to tell us where these injuries happen.
And that polygon title, is that like the tooltip that kind of comes up right there? I've noticed that when you hover around, it says like injury wrist on your Power App right there.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yep. That's the tooltip on there. Yeah.
Okay. And is that embedded in the code as like the polygon title or something? I think I saw that in your notepad.
It is, but that's not. I don't think that's. No, actually, that is where I'm getting it from, because I use those titles. So let me get back to this thing. And this is part of what that Synoptic Designer does, is that you can give an actual name to things. And so there's another table that basically references all of these titles to tie into that. And so I'm using a reference from that table for this thing, but that's how it does make that connection on the Power BI side, is through those titles. So yeah, so that is pretty much my presentation. And let me get this last slide up here. Thank you so much for attending. I hope that it's been worth your time, and that not only have I hopefully shown that it's easy to get these into your app using that app in particular that Emmanuel used, but if you get the Creative Spark, it's actually quite simple to just start making your own and get started with that. But then also, I hope that I've kind of showcased that there actually is a lot of power in those icons, ways to not only have your app be more graphically appealing and visually appealing, I mean, but to actually get signals and to inform your users about things, and to kind of use them for more than just a static image. So yeah, thank you so much for coming,